Halloween is all fun and games until it turns into a nightmare, literally. Has your little one ever woken up screaming in the middle of the night, eyes wide open, but they're not really there and you can't calm them down? That's not just a bad dream, that's a night terror. Trust me, it can be more terrifying for you as a parent than for your child. Most of us have dealt with our kids having nightmares after a bad day or scary movie, but night terrors, they're a whole different ballgame. But the good news is that today I'm going to share how you can stop these night terrors before they even start, so you can keep Halloween fun without turning it into a sleep disaster. Plus, if you stick around to the end of this video, I'll share a bonus tip for how to handle night terrors if they do happen. So just before I get into the tips, I want to clear something up. What's the difference between a nightmare and a night terror? Because the two are often confused. Nightmares are those classic bad dreams. Your child wakes up scared, maybe they're crying, but they're fully aware of what's going on around them. They'll probably tell you about the monster under the bed or scary thing they saw at the Halloween party. And in these moments, you need to comfort them, talk to them, and reassure them it was all just a bad dream. But night terrors are another story. John.
So come on, sir. Georgie.
They're most common between the ages of 3 and 8, and during a night terror, your child will scream, thrash, and even look like they're terrified, but they're not actually awake. They're stuck in this weird in-between state where they can't hear you or see you, and no matter what you do, they won't respond. As a parent, it's honestly one of the most frightening things to witness because nothing you do seems to help. But here's the thing, you don't need to actually wake them up or intervene. In fact, that could make it worse. The big difference between nightmares and night terrors is that nightmares happen later in the night during REM sleep or REM sleep, the stage where we dream. Night terrors, on the other hand, hit during deep sleep, usually in the first few hours after bedtime. And while your child will likely remember a nightmare, they won't even recall a night terror the next morning. It sounds strange, I know, but that's why knowing how to handle them is so important. Right, let's talk about Halloween itself. We all want our kids to have a good time, but there's something to keep in mind. Overstimulation is one of the biggest triggers for night terrors. And let's be honest, Halloween can be a bit much. Scary costumes, spooky decorations, loud parties is all part of the fun. But for young children, especially those who are already prone to night terrors, this kind of sensory overload can push their little brains into overdrive. And that, I'm afraid to say, is a recipe for sleep disaster. Now, I'm not saying to ban Halloween or keep them in a bubble, but be mindful of how much scary stuff they're exposed to. If they're the kind of kid who's sensitive to frights, maybe steer clear of the full-on gory costumes and horror movie marathons. Instead, try to focus on the fun side of Halloween. Costumes, pumpkin carving, and a bit of friendly trick-or-treating. Explain that it's all pretend. Sometimes just hearing you say it's not real helps them process it better. And don't forget, what they see during the day can definitely creep back into their dreams at night. Keep a close eye on what they're watching on TV. Their regular shows may be Halloween themed, or ads can pop up with scary images randomly. So keep things light, especially in the hours leading up to bedtime. Speaking of which, let's talk about the one thing kids love most about Halloween: candy. Or, as we say here in the UK, sweets. I mean, I know I struggle to resist a good stash of chocolate and gummy bears. But too much sugar before bed is like throwing petrol on the fire when it comes to night terrors. We all know what a sugar rush looks like. Hyperactivity, bouncing off the walls, and then the dreaded crash. But did you know that sugar can also disrupt sleep and lead to more frequent night terrors? So here's my tip. Try to keep the sweet treats to a minimum, especially in the hours leading up to bedtime. I know it's easier said than done when your kids are proudly showing off their trick-or-treat haul, but maybe save the majority for the next day, or better yet, spread it out over the week. If they've had some sweets, balance it out with something calming before bed. A healthy meal, warm milk, that sort of thing. Okay, so we've covered overstimulation and sugar. Now let's talk about one of the most powerful tools in your parenting toolkit. Yep, it's the bedtime routine. I mention this a lot in my videos, and that's because it's absolutely key, especially when it comes to preventing night terrors. Halloween or not, kids thrive on consistency. When they know exactly what's coming, their brain can start to wind down, making it less likely for them to have those sudden sleep disruptions like night terrors. So what does a good bedtime routine look like? Well, keep it simple and calming. Maybe a warm bath followed by a cozy bedtime story. Nothing too scary or exciting, just something that helps make them feel secure and relaxed. Dimming the lights also signals to their brain that it's time to rest. The key is to make it predictable. Your child's brain craves that repetition, and the more predictable the routine, the easier it will be for them to transition into sleep without those scary disruptions. It's like a signal to their brain that it's time to relax and helps ensure they slip into a peaceful, uninterrupted sleep. If you keep this routine consistent, even in the lead up to Halloween, it helps balance out the excitement and overstimulation from earlier in the day. It's like pressing the reset button before bed. But there are other ways of preventing night terrors. Let's get to the root of it all: good sleep hygiene. It might not sound as exciting as Halloween costumes and sweets, but this is important. One of the biggest triggers for night terrors is actually sleep deprivation. If your child isn't getting enough quality sleep, their brain struggles to transition smoothly between sleep cycles, which can lead to night terrors. And we all know that an overtired child will more likely have a rough night. So how do we fix this? First, make sure your child is getting the right amount of sleep for their age. Younger children especially need those early bedtimes and naps to help their little brains recharge. Stick to a consistent sleep schedule, even on the weekends. I know it's tempting to let them stay up later, especially when there's fun to be had, but keeping their sleep schedule regular makes a huge difference. Also, take a look at their sleep environment. Is it cool, dark and quiet? Are they comfortable in their bed? These little tweaks can have a big impact on their overall sleep quality. The better their sleep hygiene, the fewer disruptions they'll have during the night. And fewer disruptions mean less chance of night terrors. Even with the best sleep routine, sometimes night terrors can still sneak in. So what else can you do to prevent them? Well, try this simple strategy. If you notice that your child's night terrors happen around the same time every night, here's a trick. Gently wake them up about 15 to 30 minutes before the usual time the night terror strikes. I know it sounds odd, but by doing this, you're interrupting their sleep cycle, and that can help reset their brain. This tiny intervention can prevent the night terror from even happening. Just rouse them enough so they stir, maybe have them sit up for a minute, and then let them go back to sleep. It's a simple but effective technique to stop the cycle of night terrors. But what if you've done everything right and the night terrors are still happening? Don't worry, there's a simple trick you can try to stop them in their tracks, and I'll explain it next. When your child wakes up in the middle of the night, screaming and thrashing around, your first instinct as a parent is to rush in and comfort them, right? But with night terrors, less is actually more. I know it sounds counterintuitive, but when it comes to night terrors, trying to wake your child up or comforting them the way you would after a nightmare can make things worse. They're not fully awake, and in that state, they won't respond to you. In fact, your efforts to calm them might just confuse them even more. So here's what to do. Stay calm. Don't try to wake them, and don't panic, because remember, this is more frightening for you than it is for them. Instead, quietly guide them back to bed. Keep the lights dim and let the episode pass on its own. Just make sure their environment is safe, so there's no loose objects they could knock over, for example. They won't remember it in the morning, but you'll avoid turning this incident into a full-on drama. It's important to remember that night terrors are harmless, even though they are terrifying to watch. Your child isn't in any danger, and as hard as it might be just to stand by, that's often the best thing you can do. Let it pass, and your little one will fall back into a peaceful sleep. So I hope I've shown you that Halloween doesn't have to mean nightmares and night terrors. By keeping overstimulation in check, managing those sweets, sticking to a calm bedtime routine, and using good sleep hygiene, you can help your little one sleep soundly, even after all this seasonal excitement. Make sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon for more tips. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.